You can tell a winning campaign by the enthusiasm of the candidate's voters. And I know this. I've won every single one I've run in.
Warning. The political trade features probabilities and perspectives about politicians, political parties, political outcomes, and political wagering. The political trade is rated NSFP, not safe for partisans.
Welcome back to The Political Trade, the podcast for people with a passion for politics, probability, and profits. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, hosting the podcast where conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, partisans and wingnuts come together to make money betting on politics by trading in the stock market for politics at predicted.org. I'm joined by Mike Reddy, an editor at Luckbox magazine, a new prediction market trader, and the producer of The Political Trade. This is part two of a two-part series with Governor Rod Blagojevich. And in this part, we'll be walking the governor into the trading pits at predicted.org for his forecasts in a number of political prediction markets. If you haven't listened to part one yet, you should. Highlights include the governor's firsthand accounts of coping through a controversial prison sentence, the events leading up to his commutation by President Trump, and how the whole experience has inspired an advocacy stance for criminal justice and sentencing reform. And the governor told us what he really thinks about Illinois' current leadership as well. So you definitely want to check out that last episode. And thank you, Governor, for fitting us into your schedule again.
Well, thank you for having me. Hello, Mike.
Hello, hello. Welcome. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, terrific. We're going to get into the trade segment in just a moment. But before we do that, there is an outstanding question. It appears as a result of this last episode. There is a lot of love out there for you, Governor, which is why the listeners actually have been pinging us with one outstanding question that we didn't get around to asking you in the first episode. And that is, do you see yourself ever running for elected office again in the future?
That's a good question. My wife is not far from where I am. I better whisper this answer. I would like to, at some point, shock the world and do something like that if I felt the opportunity was one where I could actually do the things that I thought was right and would be helpful. It's kind of in me. It always has been. So I would very much like to do that. However, as a practical matter, I don't want my wife leaving me, and she's made it abundantly clear if I ever get back into politics, I'd have to do that by myself. Now, do I think she really means that? I frankly don't. But in all seriousness, well, there's a part of me that would like to do it because I enjoyed actually getting up every day where you can actually do something. Just a quick little anecdote. I remember this was probably in 2005, and I'm watching the evening news, the local news, and it was in November of 2005. It was the anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination, and they had this news story about this new video game, a violent video game where they have Kennedy, having his head blown off by Lee Harvey Oswald, and it's very graphic, and this is what the kids are going to buy. And I'm thinking to myself, man, someone ought to do something about that. That's just not right. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, you're the governor. You could do something about that. And so then I picked up the phone, called my deputy governor, and told him what I saw, and told him we should do something about this. There should be some restrictions on this kind of thing for young children. And as a result of that, we were able to move forward and pass a law that required video games to put warning labels on for parents so that they had an idea of what their young children are watching. So that's a small example, but that was what was fun about being governor. You can actually do things to help people and make things better as far as you saw them. So I would like very much to think that perhaps one day I could perhaps do something like that again. Realistically, I think it's very unlikely. And as a matter of my family, which has to come first always, after all that they've been through, my daughters and my wife, to put them through a life like that again, I think wouldn't be the right thing. You never know how events will unfold. But if you were going to do this betting program and bet on whether or not I'll run for office again, maybe I put it at about 2 cents, maybe 3 cents on the dollar.
So let's do that. Let's get right into your trades. To get the most out of this segment, of course, listeners know you should open up predicted.org, click on the markets tab, which is top left, follow along and leave your political ideologies at the door. And Governor, just a reminder, when we're talking about these markets and discuss a contract's price on Predicted, it's synonymous with what the market forecasts the probability of that specific outcome to be. So a contract that's trading at 40 cents, for example, implies there's a 40% probability, according to the prediction market consensus, of that outcome occurring. So keep that in mind for your first trade. Let's go right to a subject that you know very well. Will Trump grant clemency to Paul Manafort in his first term? That's the market. It's gotten some fair amount of trading. The yes shares are at 50 cents and the no's are at 51. So it's pretty even money right now. Of course, Manafort was charged with financial crimes, including tax evasion, bank fraud, and money laundering. There were about 18 different charges. He was found guilty on 8 counts. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on the remaining counts. And then, of course, he was hit with a total sentence of about 7.5 years in prison back in March of last year. Mark Vargas thinks Manafort will see clemency. So, Governor, what say you? Will Trump grant clemency to Paul Manafort in his first term?
Yes, I believe he will. I believe he'll do it after the election.
After the election, but in the first term, that trades at 50 cents. So obviously, it's a good trade. Well, you're certainly the most credible source that we've had on the clemency markets since we've started this podcast. So that is noted. Of course, the predicted rules say that as long as the clemency occurs on the pardons and commutations listing that is maintained by the U.S. Department of Justice, as long as that occurs by February 15th. So that's specifically what the rules are. And you say that's a yes.
Yes, and can I explain my thinking
Please.
behind that? Well, I think first, the most important factor with Paul Manafort receiving clemency is that President Trump correctly views what happened to him as the fruit of a poisonous tree, that the whole investigation against the president and all the people around him, including Manafort, were a result of a politically motivated hit job. And Manafort, none of this would have happened to him had he not had the misfortune of agreeing to be President Trump's campaign manager for a short period in 2016. But for that, none of it would have happened. The United States Supreme Court ruled many years ago in the 1960s, if in the case of a convicted criminal, it's found that the roots, the origins of the investigation were poisonous, then the whole tree falls. And so I think based upon that, I think there's an extremely good chance that Paul Manafort will get clemency. I would also add the fact that he's already done a significant amount of time in prison, and his journey in prison has been a very difficult one. He was being punished because of who he was, and he was put in very difficult circumstances. So I would add that to the mixture. The third point I would make is he's a man, I think, approaching 70, and his health's not good, and so that's a factor. There's a practical factor, a fourth factor, and that is that Manafort has remained loyal to President Trump and has not done a Michael Cohen to him. Because let's face it, and again, your listeners should understand how it works. These people who do these things are shakedown artists, and they dangle, and they also use forms of bribery to exact guilty pleas. It's permissible to do that for them, but that's how they operate. And so, on the one hand, they put a sword to your throat, and they say, if you don't do what we want you to do and plead guilty to something, even though it's not a crime, we're going to put you in prison for a long time. And if you don't do it, even though it is a crime, but it's not such a terrible crime that calls for a long prison sentence, we're going to give you a long prison sentence unless you say what we want. On the other hand, if you say what we want, we'll be gentle to you, like they did with my chief of staff, John Harris, who pled guilty to a non-existing crime. They shook this guy down. He didn't commit a crime on the so-called sale of the Senate, which later the appellate court ruled was not a crime. But he's now a convicted felon by giving in and pleading guilty to a non-existent crime. But his reward was, or they sent me to prison for 14 years. He got 10 days. So I think for those four considerations, I'm bullish on this. Is that the right word? Meaning
you've got it. You were buying yes shares at 50 cents. All right. Well,
yes.
We'll move on to the next market. We're going to move down south to Florida. Trump won Florida, of course, in 2016 with 49% of the vote to Clinton's 48%. And the market is which party will win Florida in the 2020 presidential election. It's trading also near even money right now. About a million shares have traded. Republicans are a yes at 49 cents. Democrats are a yes at 53 cents. And what's your call?
I'm bullish about Florida, that President Trump will win Florida, and I believe he will do better this time, notwithstanding COVID, than he did against Hillary in 2016. I think you have a lot of diversity in that state. It's a growing state, one of I mean, maybe the fastest growing state still. The diversity is very interesting, so that you can understand how the people in Florida will vote. But a large senior citizen population in Florida, a large Jewish population on the East Coast. President Trump has been steadfast, loyal, and true to Israel and our major ally in the Middle East, a country that has so much in common with us, and our interests are so interconnected. He kept his promise that other presidents have made and didn't keep, and that is moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. And so the Jewish constituency down there, many of them are transplanted New Yorkers. And I know New York is not going to be a state that Trump wins, but he still is a New Yorker. Elderly people who see the violence and the chaos on the streets and recoil from that. Elderly people who support the police and see the Democrats not supporting the police. They see Biden feckless and weak when it comes to supporting the police. I think those factors contribute heavily to President Trump. Then you have the Cuban community down in Miami. They were very big for Trump in 2016. They'll be even bigger for him in 2020 because Obama and Biden were kind of cozying up to Fidel Castro, and hardcore anti-communists in the Cuban community in Miami are not for that. And then when they see Bernie Sanders socialism creeping into the Democratic Party, becoming the mainstream of the Democratic Party. At least that's what Bernie Sanders says, and I believe there's an element of truth to that. They're going to recoil even more. So those dynamics favor very much President Trump. Then I throw in that vast silent majority, which is going to be a big vote in this election. I think the turnout's going to be really strong in places where it hasn't been that strong before. So I believe Florida will be strong for President Trump. So I'm bullish about that.
Well, clearly a swing state and a pivotal state in the election. And currently, of course, Trump is trailing Biden in the polls by about 4 points right now. The RCP average has Biden nearly 5 points ahead of Trump. But that's definitely a key race to watch. And let's move on. We'll go out west to which party will win the U.S. Senate special election in Arizona in 2020. So this is the Senate special election. That's Democrat Mark Kelly against Martha McSally. Of course, the Republican incumbent McSally is up against Kelly. The Democrats in the special election are way out in front. 82 cents for Mark Kelly, 19 cents for Mark Kelly, 19 cents for Martha McSally. McSally was appointed to the Senate seat by the Arizona Governor Doug Ducey to fill the vacancy that John McCain left after he died, and then his appointed successor, which was John Kyle, then subsequently resigned as well. And of course, Kelly's an astronaut, an engineer, a former U.S. Navy captain. He flew his first shuttle mission in 2001. A recent poll conducted last week had Kelly 19 points ahead of McSally, and RCP averages have him about 7.5 points ahead. So, what say you? Who will win the special election? Is it Mark Kelly or Martha McSally? What's your call?
I think Mark Kelly's going to win that one. The Senate seat in Arizona is going to go to the Democrat. He seems to be a compelling candidate with a very interesting story. I can't imagine, unless they find some real negative stuff on him, that he'll be able to collapse the 19-point advantage now. Won't probably last. He won't win by that much. And McSally is going to benefit by President Trump's coattails in Arizona, so she'll move up. But she didn't win that seat to begin with. That's a negative. When you get appointed, you haven't tested yourself among the voters. I think she ran against for this other Senate seat and was defeated. So there may be something with her as a candidate where they have a saying in politics. The consultants say it's like selling dog food. The dogs just won't eat it. And perhaps, and I'm not saying this is true with her because I don't know enough about it, but perhaps for whatever reason, she's just not sticking with the voters. But on the other side, this Democratic candidate seems to be a real positive candidate with a tremendous resume. He's not, a typical politician. His wife, I believe, was the congresswoman who was shot. Is that right? Gabby Gifford? I'm not sure about that, but that won't change the election one way or the other. The fact that he was an astronaut, I'd want to vote for him just because he was an astronaut. So I feel like your listeners are in a real good place if they're going to vote for the Kelly as the winner in Arizona. The Democrats going to win that seat.
And still a nice return at 82 cents. But let's see how that influences the next market, which staying in the same state, which party will win Arizona in the 2020 presidential election? So will Arizona be red? Will it be blue? The market's pretty much even money right now. Republicans are at 47 cents, Democrats at 56 cents. Of course, Arizona went to Trump in 2016 and received about 48% of the vote to Clinton's 44.5. Biden leads by nearly 5 points in the 538 average and 2 points in the RCP average. What say you, Governor? Which party is going to win Arizona in the 2020 presidential election?
President Trump is going to win Arizona. The coattail effect is it's from the top down, not the guy beneath you up. So that Trump's coattails will help McSally. She won't drag him down. I think also voters sometimes like to show, even to themselves, that they're open-minded and bipartisan, that they're not just one party. And so it's fun sometimes to be able to vote for your candidate at the top of the ticket because you're true blue Republican, true blue Democrat. But you know what? I have an open mind. And so, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump and I'm going to vote for Kelly. You see, you can't just color me red or blue. I'm actually purple on something like this. I think they feel good about themselves when they do that from time to time, when the chance to do it presents itself. And I think that, again, as I said, this guy Kelly seems to be a very good candidate. I think President Trump is going to win Arizona. The big wild card in all of this is COVID. Uh, but I think the American people are getting used to this new situation that we have to deal with and overcome. I think there are other issues that are going to drive the final decision, like the economy, like public safety, like the direction of our country, and like the two candidates because they're so different. The one guy is strong and tough and vigorous and vibrant, and Joe Biden, he's a nice man, but he's feeble and he's weak and he's doesn't want to campaign. By the way, that's another factor we'll discuss maybe in some of these other bets, but that's something your listeners should listen to. The candidates have duties to get out there and make their case to the voters. And if this guy's going to sit in his basement and not campaign and run a front porch campaign, which is how it used to be in the 19th century, that was the regular way of doing it. He's going to lose in the 21st century if he does that. Arizona goes to Trump.
Thank you, Governor. Our next market will take us back to the state of Illinois. But before we do that, let's take a quick break. Ahead, we have another 4 markets to walk through with you, including the big one. All of that and more in a minute. But first,
want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability. Named the best new magazine of 2019. Luckbox is a must-read for side hustlers, gamblers, entrepreneurs, and active investors. Each issue features best bets from prediction market experts, as well as timely sports wagering, stocks, options, futures, and cryptocurrency trading ideas. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, listeners of the Political Trade can receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Just visit getluckbox.com to receive the award-winning magazine right in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox for free today. Learn more at getluckbox.com.
our next market, actually, I'm really looking forward to your insight here because, again, you're going to be the most credible resource we are going to have in forecasting this market right in our own backyard in Illinois. Which party will win the 2020 House race in Illinois' 13th district? Now, the 13th district is further downstate in Illinois. It's makes up a stretch of the central portion of the state, including Calhoun and Christian, DeWitt, Greene, Jersey, Macon, Montgomery, and Platte counties. These are all counties I'm sure you know very well. Portions of Bond and Champaign and Madison are also included in the district. The current representative of the 13th Congressional District is Republican Rodney Davis, who assumed the office back in 2013. He's lined up against a new Democratic challenger, Betsy Londrigan, in the general election coming up on November 3rd. Small population, around 700,000. The district is 82% white, 11% black, 3.5% Asian, and 3% Hispanic. Median household incomes around $45,000, and the high school graduation rate is around 90%. Most notably, is Davis is the incumbent. In 2016, he had 60% of the vote. So, how would you call this? The Republicans are at 53 cents. Again, this is like an even money trade. It's thinly traded. I will warn our predicted listeners about that. There's not a lot of shares in this market, but who wins this race?
I think the Republican wins the race. I think that's a good bet for your listeners too. That I know that area real well. I was the governor, and when I was reelected in 2016, I won by 10 points in my reelection. Um, but I won only 6 counties in the state. And if you were to look at the map, it was all red except for 6 blue counties. But of course, Cook County was one of them, and that obviously is a very big one, an important one. Um, and I won down in the southwest part of the state as well. But for the most part, it was all red. Now that was years ago, and things are not the same. But the fact that this Republican won 2 years ago with 60%, he'll win by more this time because again, it's a national election with the president on the top of the ticket, and that demographic that you described for me is a tailor-made Trump type of demographic. So Trump's coattails will also help the Republican. I'm bullish for this guy Davis. I think he's going to remain in United States Congress.
Another good trade with a nice payout there. We're going to move back out west now. Which party will win the U.S. Senate election in Colorado in 2020? Of course, in Colorado, that's Republican incumbent Cory Gardner is up against the Democratic challenger and former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper. Gardner's held the Senate seat since 2015, but according to 538 and Morning Consult polls, Hickenlooper's mid single digits ahead as of mid July. And Colorado, of course, tends to go blue. Clinton won it in 2016. Biden has a strong polling lead right now, and Colorado's been blue in the recent past. The polls and prediction markets say it's blue now. How would you call this? Democratic Hickenlooper at 88 cents or Republican Cory Gardner at 15 cents in the U.S. Senate election?
I think Hickenlooper might win that one. The former governor, he's, as I understand it, having been in Colorado, sheltering in place for 8 years, my sense is that he's pretty well liked. And Colorado's been trending blue more and more. The demographics in Colorado have been changing. There are a lot of people and families that are moving to Colorado from California. And so they're making Colorado less of a competitive state and they're making it more of a state that's leaning blue. The governor there is a very liberal governor. Now, Hickenlooper was reelected governor in 2014. I remember watching some of that, just seeing some of that on the local news in Colorado because I was there. And Hickenlooper had a real tough reelection, barely won. So he's not invincible. But I think the national election here is going to benefit Hickenlooper. Gardner, to his advantage, has been the incumbent for 6 years. He's been a steadfast supporter of most of Trump's agenda. He stood tall for some of the controversial issues. He's going to benefit from that because his voters are going to come up and be enthusiastic. Colorado Springs is a very conservative area with a strong sort of evangelical Christian political movement. He'll benefit from that. And but I think what hurts Gardner at the end, and by the way, I'm told from some of the prison guards that were there who are for him that he does tremendous constituent services. And you shouldn't dismiss that, even at a state level. The day-to-day tender mercies that we do in government for the people in our communities that you never get press about touch people's lives in a positive way. And they tell their neighbors and their friends and their family, and they're grateful for that. And they go out and vote for the congressman or the senator who did something nice for them and helped them, whatever it might be. Gardner, as I understand it, has a real effective operation across the state of constituent services. That's the kind of stuff that is sort of under the radar that doesn't really poll. So that he has going for him. I think the reason I'm leaning Hickenlooper, and I would bet Hickenlooper, is because I'm not so sure that Trump is going to work that hard to try to compete in Colorado this time. I think they feel like their time's better spent in other places like Minnesota, New Hampshire, and perhaps even in Virginia, a place where I think they might think they could win. And so if, in fact, they're not going to really try hard in Colorado at the presidential race, then I think that's going to diminish Cory Gardner's chances a little bit. I'm going to say Hickenlooper, but it's not going to be anywhere near a margin that people might think it's going to be. That's going to be a real competitive race. And I wouldn't be shocked if Cory Gardner held on.
Okay, we'll come back and look at that race. We're going to move on now to our final two markets, which of course are the big ones, and we'll deal with them simultaneously. The first is will Donald Trump win the popular vote in 2020? And the second market is who will win the 2020 US presidential election. Of course, knowing that the Electoral College is the ultimate decider of the presidency. So let's start with the first. Will Donald Trump win the popular vote in 2020? Of course, there have only been 5 US presidential elections where the winner lost the popular vote. Trump was one of them against Clinton, of course, Gore v. Bush, and then we go back to Harrison versus Cleveland, and Hayes versus Tilden. In 1824, Adams defeated Jackson. Trump is trailing currently in most of the polls. In the predicted markets, the no's are at 79 cents and the yeses are 22 cents. The question again, will Donald Trump win the popular vote in 2020, Governor?
Well, my heart tells me he will. My head tells me he won't.
What are we going
One of
with?
Well, I'm gonna just break it down. One of the qualities I have that I'm trying to work on is to not get over exuberant about my excessive optimism, right? Because if I just go with that, I'm going to say Trump's going to win because of circumstances that are unfolding as we speak, the changing mood of the country, what they're seeing out there, with what's happening in big cities, and the chaos, and the divide between the Democrats and Republicans on how you handle mob violence, um, as well as the economy, where Trump, I think, no pun intended, overwhelmingly trumps Biden on that issue, and that's one that pocketbook issues people vote on. But having said that, and then there's this possibility of Joe Biden. We don't really know what the nature of Joe. I shouldn't laugh about this because it goes to his health, but we don't know the nature of Joe Biden's capacity and whether or not he really is capable of first and foremost being the president of the United States, uh, and then the other being whether he's capable of running a campaign and being a candidate that gets out there campaigning through the rough and tumble of the business, and whether he could take the hard questions day in and day out. That's what campaigns are about. They are job interviews on many levels, and among them is it gives the people who are going to make the decision a chance to evaluate whether candidates, whether he or she are able to, take the heat and handle the struggle, the day-to-day struggles. And if you can't do it in a campaign, you're not going to be able to do it in the hardest job in the world. So that's something that where if Biden doesn't step up and rise to the occasion, the whole bottom might fall out. He might collapse everywhere. Now, do I think that's going to happen? I would not bet on that. So I look at it this way objectively. My head tells me Biden's going to win New York overwhelmingly, largely because of the nature of the state being Democrat in presidential races overwhelmingly for a long time. And then another part of it is Trump recognizes the futility of it. He's not going to waste any time or resources trying to do anything about that. He's going to use the resources in states like New York and California to help him win those battleground states, like he did 4 years ago. California, same thing. It's going to be overwhelmingly Democrat, and Trump recognizes it. They're just going to concede that, not waste time there, which is the smart thing to do. So Biden's going to come out of New York and California with already a couple of million vote plurality, and that's hard to make up in the other places. And then you have states like a big state like Illinois that's likely to go blue, and probably with some cushion. Although again, you have circumstances here that still are unfolding. So when I look at that, and I look at the fact that the Trump campaign is all about being practical and focusing on the areas that are going to decide one way or the other who the president's going to be, like he did 4 years ago, and like Hillary, frankly, neglected to do, I would have to say Biden is going to win the popular vote, but by far less than what Hillary lost it by 4 years ago, which was something like 3 million, I think.
And so that sets up our very last question: who will win the 2020 U.S. presidential election? 95 million shares traded in this contract had predicted. Joe Biden's currently in front at 57 cents. Donald Trump is at 47 cents. And of course, we know where the polls are. Basically, no real post convention bounce. Both Morning Consult and CBS News polls coming out of the Democratic convention did not give any bounce. It just maintained the 10-point lead that Biden has. And it's too early to have any news coming out of the Republican convention. No new polls as of yet. But the big question, who will win the 2020 U.S. presidential election?
I'm very bullish on President Trump being reelected, and I'll give you reasons why. To begin with, uh, no incumbent president has failed to win reelection who has kept his political base. President Trump's base is totally devoted to him. He's not abandoned them. They're not going to abandon him. They're filled with enthusiasm and energy. I'll bolster my case by pointing out recent history. Obama was able to win re-election in 2012 because he kept his base. Bill Clinton was able to win re-election in 1996 because he kept his base. George Bush's father lost in 1992 to Bill Clinton because he lost his base. You remember he said, "You're probably too young. Read my lips, no new taxes." He said this in 1988. Then the first thing he did when he was elected president was what? Became a typical politician, broke his promise, and raised taxes. Ronald Reagan was overwhelmingly reelected in 1984. He won 49 out of the 50 states. He kept his base. Richard Nixon was overwhelmingly elected in 1972. He 62% of the vote, 49 states for him. The only one he lost was Massachusetts. He kept his base. Jimmy Carter lost re-election in 1980 against Ronald Reagan because Jimmy Carter couldn't hold on to his base. White working class voters went to Reagan. White working class voters are going to go to Trump. They did in 2016. They're going to go to Trump even more so in 2020 for a whole bunch of reasons. Among them is Biden's record of selling those jobs to China and taking those jobs away. And where were those jobs? They were in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, Ohio, in those battleground states. So I truly believe that's a major factor why Trump is going to win. Secondly, look at the two candidates. I think there's a stark contrast. And a lot of people, get their feathers ruffled. They don't like Trump's style, his kind of badass style. On the other hand, a lot of people like it, like I do. And I'm telling you something, whether you like it or not, people pretty much know where this guy stands. And that's refreshing and unusual in politics. And I believe most of the people that are going to decide this election, one way or the other, are people who are sick and tired of the typical fake politicians who just talk out of talking points, sound bites, and are poll-driven and focus group-driven. And Biden is those things. The contrast between Trump and Biden, the career politician who's been there for 47 years, the rough and tumble, successful billionaire businessman and entertainer who's been shaking things up, that contrast tremendously benefits Trump among those voters who are going to decide this election. The hardcore Democrats, and the far left are going to be with Biden. But Trump's got his base. And so those final voters will decide. I think they're going to overwhelmingly turn to Trump, and they generally make their commitment in the second to third week of October. So you'll be seeing polls one way, but it'll drop Trump's way significantly in the last week or so in October. So he'll win in a way better than he beat Hillary. Then I would say the other is the kind of campaigns they're going to run, and the contrast is going to be very stark. You're going to have a vigorous, active President Trump. It's unclear whether Biden's going to even put a campaign out. He'll probably do things here and there, but people are going to get the images of that just by seeing it. So I think that's going to strongly favor Trump. Then again, I would say, Trump's got a stronger case to make. Let's face it. Before COVID, this economy was rocking and rolling. And again, the issues that people mostly vote on are those pocketbook issues. And so when they ask themselves the question, will I be better off 4 years from now than I am now when it comes to my chance of getting ahead and having a decent job and moving forward, Trump or Biden? I may not like Trump's tweets. I may get turned off by some of the things he says, but this guy's going to be good for my pocketbook. So I think he wins on that one big time. Then there's the enthusiasm gap. That's a big thing in politics. Don't dismiss that. Here's what the pollsters miss, and these so-called elitists who call these elections, who don't run in them themselves. You can tell a winning campaign by the enthusiasm of the candidate's voters. And I know this. I've won every single one I've run in. You can see I was away and my view wasn't so good, but I could sense it even from there. from prison, that Trump supporters were a lot more enthusiastic than Hillary's. And so he won. And that's true in all campaigns. So the candidate that has the more enthusiastic supporters is the one that wins, barring some extreme scandal. So for those reasons, as well as the differences on the issues, I'm very bullish about President Trump. I think he's in a real strong position to win. I wouldn't be too concerned about the polls. I think he's going to win in those states that he has to win. And I think he might actually surprise people in some other states he didn't win last time. Keep an eye on Virginia. That one interests me. I think Virginia is a state Trump might be able to win.
Well, Governor, these are really valuable trades to our listeners, and your insights are certainly worth noting. Just having spent the last two episodes with you on our podcast, my advice to the president would be to take some communication pointers from you. It's been our absolute pleasure to have you on. So thanks again for taking your time and joining us on The Political Trade.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, we look forward to having you back too. We're going to probably ask to have you back after the election and see how right you were and kind of put these same questions in front of you again. So best of luck to you, Governor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Best of luck to you and to your family. Thank you.
That's going to wrap up today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to The Political Trade. Tell your friends about us and make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Next week, Alan Lichtman, a history professor at the American University, will be joining us. Lichtman co-developed the Keys to the White House, a model that has correctly chosen the winner of every presidential election since 1984. His forecasts include calling the 2016 election for Donald Trump against all odds. So thanks again for joining us today. Check out thepoliticaltrade.com to sign up for our newsletter. Find us on social media. Send us a message. It's all there at thepoliticaltrade.com. And this is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
And remember, believe in math, master your trade, and join us next time on The Political Trade.